There's a there's three royal stories this evening, a triptych of scandal, discomfort, and against all odds, a smattering of delight, and it's not where you expect it. The House of Windsor has outdone itself again in providing tabloid fodder, with Prince Andrew, King Charles, and Prince Harry all vying for our attention in various shades of interest. So, beginning with the embarrassing one, the word that hardly does justice to the plight of the Duke of York, who has once again found himself in the murky waters of financial intrigue. And it appears that Prince Andrew, in a bid to sustain the lifestyle to which he has become accustomed, has entered into a lucrative arrangement with a Dutch firm, Startup Boot Camp, which aims to reignite his global network pitch at the palace. The same network, mind you, that was meant to fade into oblivion when he was excommunicated from royal duties in the wake of that catastrophic Newsnight interview. And despite the King's tactful financial guillotine last summer, Andrew seems to have found a way to monetize his past connections, particularly in the Middle East, in China and Southeast Asia, regions where scrutiny of ethical business dealings presumably is fairly flexible. The fact that this deal, which could net him millions, was being negotiated even as the King was drafting his financial order is, as Buckingham Palace would put it, a coincidence. One might wonder, though, why does a man with no official role, no discernible expertise, and a PR disaster of a reputation still command financial interest? The answer is simple. There will always be those willing to buy access even when the doors they seek to enter have been politely but firmly shut. And the embarrassment here lies not just in Andrew's stubborn refusal to accept his royal redundancy, but in the palace's inability to sever him entirely. And then we move to the uncomfortable, in which King Charles perhaps inadvertently finds himself dragged into the political arena, and the King, ever the architectural enthusiast, decided to take Keir Starmer and Deputy Prime Minister Angela Rayner on a little tour of his grand project. This is Poundbury-esque vision of community living that seeks to redefine British housing. No doubt he was also doing his best to cement the relationship between the Prime Minister and his deputy. So, a good thing, really. But it's a noble cause, one might say, except the timing was suspect. With a major housing announcement imminent, Starmer's visit to the King's duchy-funded utopia has set tongues wagging about royal neutrality. Was this a simple alignment of interests, or was this the monarch giving an implicit nod to government housing policy? The very notion of the King unwittingly entangled in party politics is enough to send constitutional purists into palpitations. And despite Number 10's insistence that there was nothing political about the visit, the optics tell a slightly different story. The King standing shoulder to shoulder with the Labour Prime Minister and his firebrand deputy inspecting housing policy in the run-up to a May local election. If nothing else, it signals Charles's willingness to be seen as a modernising monarch, but it also leaves room for questions about whether he's unwittingly undermined the delicate balance of royal impartiality. My hunch is that this is a storm in a teacup, and actually, the PR people ought to get round to saying the King is trying to patch up differences in the power machinery, with a nice jolly down to Poundbury. So and this leaves us with, putting the scandal and the discomfort behind, move on to something joyous. And who I hear you ask, is responsible for bringing a little mirth and delight to the monarchy, none other than the exiled Prince Harry, proving that royal banishment need not be synonymous with misery, and that really this is somebody who we should have in the heart of in the bosom of the royal family. The Duke of Sussex, at the Invictus Games in Vancouver, was given a pair of budgie smugglers by the Australian team, tight, skimpish swimwear in a shade of humour that would leave the occasional diver looking uncomfortable, and something that Andrew could never have pulled off. And with characteristic irreverence, Harry declared it so inappropriate, I love it. In a moment of levity, he reminds us why, despite all the transatlantic acrimony, he remains fundamentally more likeable than so many others in the royal family. His wife Meghan, ever the brand-conscious Duchess, leaned into the softer feel-good moments, reading to children about inclusivity, mingling with families, being photographed holding a baby, an echo of the human touch PR strategy that once made Diana untouchable in public affection. And meanwhile, Harry, far from the shadow of the British press, basked in the adoration of the crowd, as if to underline the irony that exile has been his greatest PR coup. And therein lies the crux of our royal hierarchy of newsworthiness. Prince Andrew, still desperately clinging to influence, remains a source of deep embarrassment. King Charles, attempting to quietly support causes close to his heart, finds himself awkwardly dragged into the political limelight. And Prince Harry, the supposed outcast, emerges as the only one with any sense of dignity, frankly. Perhaps there's a lesson here. Exile, when voluntary, is often liberation. In shedding the weight of expectation, Harry has found his way to enjoy a role, even if that role now involves being a poster boy for Team Australia's finest swimwear. And, the next thing he's going to get into is knitting, I suppose. Meanwhile, back in Britain, the monarchy continues its delicate balance between scandal, service, and sheer absurdity. And so the royal soap opera, rolls on.